I will not focus on the theoretical discussion today, and I'm also not a philosopher, as a disclaimer. I'm an interdisciplinary scholar, and I position myself within the field of environmental humanities. And today I will largely talk, my talk will be based on my ethnographic notes that were part of my fieldwork in Ukraine, and also just returned home this summer, mostly in the south, and a part of my work on a manuscript that, thank you so much, will be published with Polity and is dedicated to the environmental impacts of Russia's war in Ukraine. And the ethnographic research was supported by a grant documenting Ukraine from IWM, Institute for Human Sciences, Vienna, to whom I'm very grateful as an independent scholar between institutions. So as I said, it won't be highly theoretical, but I hope it will help me to map out some of the frames I'm trying to work with to grasp this complicated context that we're witnessing at the moment in Ukraine. And in particular, I'm interested in extending the context of environmental destruction to look at other sins. So one of the sins is the conditions of work and life of those working on the ground in Ukraine, particularly in conservation, and the people who are actually documenting environmental destruction on the ground. And this summer I worked a lot with environmentalists in Ukraine and witnessed the tough work and the conditions that they're living in at the moment. And as Tanya Richardson, my colleague, wrote recently in an article, in a brilliant article for Current History that looks at interspecies relations during the war. It's the profound fragility, this is a quote, the profound fragility and uncertainty experienced in daily life, end quote. But also, as always in my work, I'm looking at longer contexts of coloniality in the region, and how it manifests this longer context, even with the most recent interaction that we are facing. And of course, this idea of looking at longer contexts is not new. There are many other people who work on it in questions of memory, history, and culture. And I hope to kind of look at this tightly entangled relations and aspects and unravel them with the example that I'm going to be looking at. And of course, the other question that guides me is the question, so what does environmental justice actually mean for Ukraine today, and how can we imagine it in the future? And when we are talking about environmental justice, we are facing in Ukraine two event aspects at the same time. One is climate emergency, which is of course affecting everybody globally, and yet it also affects all of us disproportionately, where some parts of the world are more affected by it than others. And then in Ukraine it overlaps with the full-scale Russia's invasion. With the global climate emergency, one of the aspects is that some regions in the world, of course, are, as I said, more affected. And we're thinking about home, thinking about Ukraine, and I come from Mykolaiv. There's a map, Google map of Mykolaiv, which is the city in the south of Ukraine. I mean, many here from Ukraine, of course, know, maybe have been. But it's located in the arid steppe zone, climate zone, which is at risk of climate emergency, and in particular droughts. So when I think of climate emergency and I think of the South, I think of the imaginary of climate emergency, which is heat. And through heat, this imaginary is populated with images of dryness and thirst and heaviness of one's body and lethargic states, dehydration, heat stroke, heart attack, slow death. Heat in English is pronounced, if I can, there's a way to move forward somehow. Heat, spelled with H-E-A-T, is in English pronounced with a long vowel, heat. And learning in English as a child, I remember practicing for hours how to pronounce long and short vowels, which didn't come very organically to me. So E and E, right, the difference in English. And this summer I thought a lot about heat as H-E-A-T with a longer vowel, and hit as H-I-T with a short vowel. And when I was walking the streets of Mykolaiv, my hometown, I was learning about both heat and heat, the slow death from heat, and the ruins of buildings where the missiles hit. Hopefully this is working. In Europe, the summer of 2023 was feared to be the hottest on record. Mykolaiv in summer is marked by extreme heat, and when the wind comes, it feels like a hairdryer. Mykolaiv in summer is marked by bodies exhausted and carrying heavy bottles of water. The tap water is not potable. It is marked by sites of ruins and the debris of the buildings destroyed by Russians. In July, when I was there, in the end of July, another Russian rocket destroyed several apartment blocks, killing 2 and injuring 18 people. It is marked by the harrowing sounds of air raid sirens that cut the dry air at night and during the day, which locals don't seem to notice anymore. Their bodies are too tired and there are very few shelters in a city. It is marked by the ghost of trees cut down last year for the construction of military fortification. More than 1,000 trees were cut in the center of the city and everywhere else. And the unbearably hot summer in Mykolaiv is an experience of overlapping and entangled violences. The colonial violence of a full-scale invasion and the violence of global climate emergency. In addition to death by Russian missiles, there is slow, or maybe not even so slow, death all over the city. Bodies of dead fish are washed up. Plants are burned to blackness in the sun. On the 28th of August 2023, the Ukrainian Hydrometeorological Center reported that Mykolaiv witnessed a record-breaking temperature of 38.5 Celsius. On the 12th of April 2022, Russia deliberately destroyed a water pipeline that runs to Mykolaiv from Kherson. Mykolaiv had received previously all its water from the Dnipro River. Even though, as you've seen on the map, it's situated on a point where 2 rivers meet and become a Bug estuary, exactly because it is a Bug estuary, all water surrounding the city, including groundwater, is extremely mineralized, so it's salty. It's not suitable to drink and to cook with. And so for about a month, the city first had absolutely zero water, centralized water supply. The water was brought by volunteers, many from Odessa, and distributed. People were also lining up next to the rivers to collect water. This is when the city was extremely shelled, so it was quite dangerous as well to be outside. People were collecting rainwater. Then about a month into it, the municipality authorities made a very difficult decision to bring salinized, mineralized water into the centralized system, which is a precedent that hasn't happened anywhere else in the world on such a massive scale. Prior to the full-scale invasion, the city had around 500,000 people living in. Many people left, but still at least half remained. So the salty water started running from the taps, and today, almost a year and a half later, and following the Kakhovka Ecocide, the water in Mykolaiv apartments is still not suitable for cooking or drinking, or some people would claim even washing. The salty water has affected the pipes, as you can imagine, which constantly are now leaking and breaking. And today, when you go around the city, everywhere you see the maintenance brigades from Mykolaiv Water Utility, Vodokanal, fixing the system constantly. And in our apartment, for almost a week, for example, there was no water during the day. It was coming and going in the evening and the day. And when it was coming and going, it was looking like this. You can see the color of the water. So today the city is united through the network of stations with water containers and trails of people constantly carrying water bottles back and forth. The unbearably hot summer in Mykolaiv is heavy like this water, carried up the stairs, across the avenues and cracked asphalt, all the way to the 5th floor without an elevator, the weight of water bottles achingly living in one's arms and back. And it is among this backdrop of the city, of the summer, very hot summer, in the city that I met many absolutely incredible environmentalists who are working on the ground and documenting and studying the impacts of environmental destruction that we are talking about today. So, for example, I went on a trip with a small group in the end of July, and the group consisted of Ina Timchenko, who is an absolutely incredible person doing amazing environmental work in Mykolaiv in particular, her colleague Diana Krasinska, and Oleg Terkach, a very renowned conservationist in Ukraine and a botanist. So we set up to go on a day trip as part of the project that I started documenting some of the villages not far from Mykolaiv. We agreed to meet at one of the central intersections of the city from where we would be driven by car, and another fantastic woman, Pani Natalia, volunteered to drive us there. And I arrived slightly early, and the moment I stepped out of the bus, the air alert started blasting, and there's nowhere really to go, so I was kind of hanging around the big parking lot, waiting for everybody, hoping this would be off. And this was the space, just thinking of the landscape around it, where on the 26th of February, just 2 days into the full-scale invasion, this exact street that I was standing, which is the center of the city, witnessed a battle between Russian occupational forces and Ukrainian defenders. And you can also imagine geographically, Mykolaiv doesn't share a border with Russia. It is not close to Russia. It doesn't share a border with Crimea either. So already on the third day, they were so deeply inside Ukrainian territory. They were crushed, the Russian occupational forces were crushed, but still you can see the memory of this battle and plywood everywhere, just at the heart of the city. Anyway, we finally assembled, and our driver, as I mentioned, Pani Natalia, also happened to be an amateur local historian, so she came with a book on local history of Mykolaiv. The history of Mykolaiv, which was founded as or the official myth, was founded that it's founded as an imperial shipyard, is extremely imperial, and the narratives are strongly dominated by this imperial agenda, and so it's very difficult to find any alternative history. So she brought those books to share because they were narrating Mykolaiv differently. And just to also think of the conditions in which this knowledge produced and distributed, she recommended me to go to a small shop in the center, which was not a bookshop. It was a shop that sells light bulbs and lamps and electrical cables. But the owner of it happens to be also very passionate about local history, and it's the best place in the city to find books on history, in fact. So that day we headed off to the village called Halitsinovo, which is just right on the outskirts of Mykolaiv, and we were particularly interested in looking at so-called monument of nature, памятка природы, Stalo-Halitsynski steppe. Writing about Leo de Memoir, Pierre Nora claimed that once memory stops being alive, it becomes a monument, a site of memory. So it's quite interesting to think of this idea of monument of nature and what it means in our human imagination, right? Especially when steppes as ecosystems are the most endangered in Europe, and they are less than 3% Romanian currently. And the fighting in Ukraine mostly takes place in the steppe region. So what does it mean for us to think of it that way? So Staro-Halitsynski steppe is quite a narrow patch of land. It's a very small piece that remained after extensive plowing and construction and everything that happens that erases its ecosystems. And it's kind of bordered by summer houses, a forest, a railway, a cemetery. So it's kind of squeezed there on the outskirts of this village. And we came there to look at this space, but particularly to look at this one plant. And here I'm thinking today with Irina Zamorova, who is here and will be speaking after me, a beautiful essay on Adonis vernalis, dreamings, which I really recommend for reading, in which she questions how does a space work change when we start thinking with the plant in mind. So this particular steppe, Staro-Halitsynski steppe, is the only home, in fact, on Earth to a particular type of knapweed, or voloshka in Ukrainian, centaurea protomargaritisea klokov. The Latin, of course, might not tell you much. Voloshka prvina perlina in Ukrainian. So Mykolaiv is home to 3 endangered species of knapweed. And after the full-scale invasion, 2 of these were included in the list by Ukrainian Nature Conservation Group that listed plant species on the brink of extinction because of full-scale invasion, and one of the species you can see here. And you can see the photo taken by Ukrainian State Emergency Service after the fire. So the space that we were at was extremely shelled. There was heavy fighting, including this particular patch of land that was affected. After the shelling, basically, as everywhere in Ukraine, there is extreme scarcity of demanding engineers, and so priority of demanding goes, of course, for roads, for houses, also for electricity, critical infrastructure, all kind of other critical infrastructure. So conservation sites are not really demanded. They're not a priority. So when we arrived there, nobody has checked Staro-Halitsynski steppe. We were not sure if there are mines, but there definitely would be remnants of shells, cluster munitions, and other explosives. So basically, we were told not to walk across it, because we wouldn't know what in, especially in tall grass, you don't know what's inside. So we end up staying on the asphalt road, kind of trying to look, well, we were looking particularly for this knapweed, but also looking for other species that inhabit it. And Oleg Derkach, as I said, a prominent botanist and extraordinary conservationist who, together with Holik, secured protected status for so many places in the south of Ukraine, including Staro-Halitsynski steppe, that thanks to him that we have it as a monument of nature conservation status in the 90s. So he was telling us about the species he saw. He's an incredible storyteller as well. And this particular, why this space is important, because it's an example of so-called sandy steppe, river sandy steppe. So these are the sandy steppes located near the shores of the river. So this is the southern Bug River, and as I said, this ecosystem or this habitat is really rapidly disappearing because Mykolaiv has been built over it because of construction site, but also it's been plowed, and now on top of everything, the war also contributes. So carried on by his stories about plants, Oleg Derkach went into the site from the asphalt road, and we ended up staying and screaming, "Come back, please," because we were worried that he would step on something. But this just also gives you an idea how hard it is to make a passionate botanist return from the field, right? And how difficult it is to be a botanist not being able to access the site. There were also, while we were there, the environmentalists took lab results of water. And after we returned, and this is when the story takes another turn and another dimension in addition to this plant, when we returned from the site and after the lab results were revealed that the water in this village had very high concentration of arsenic, which is a particular strong poison. And the reason why this is not the first time happens. So this is another map of a close-up of this place, and where you see the heart. This is the actual steppe, and the two red kind of square, perpendicular-looking shapes. Are related to a massive plant, one of the biggest industries of Mykolaiv, and in fact one of the biggest industries of this kind in Europe, called Mykolaiv Alumina Refinery, which was built in the 80s and produced alumina, which is a kind of it's a kind of raw material for production of aluminium then afterwards. And part of the work of the refinery, it's one of the types of industrial waste that it produces is bauxite residue, червоний шлам in Ukrainian, that you can see here, which is stored open air, and which at the moment holds more than 47 tons of this bauxite residue. As you can see, one of these open air fields is right next to the Bug estuary. If it potentially leaks into the Bug estuary, it will be a massive disaster for the Black Sea including, but also there's constant kind of small leaks of this industrial waste happening all the time. And it's very closely. It's very close. It located very closely, and of course the stuff also gets into ground and water. I mean, you can see it here how it looks. This fields, and these are photos from 2011 when. It happens from time to time where the dust from this fields are distributed across, and it just covered the villages in the area. And it was the start of the big discussion of the impacts on health and land and water in the region, because all of these villages are also situated on a Bug estuary, and the estuary and the Black Sea are also in danger. In 2020, there was a civic campaign called Stop Schlam, Stop Bauxite Residue, that was initiated in Mykolaiv by the residents trying to sue the plant and trying to open the case, and they ordered an independent investigation that revealed the content of aluminium, chromium, lead, barium, strontium, boron, and other chemicals that were found in the hair of people living in the villages. And also the statistics shows that in this particular area in the past 10 years the cancer rates increased compared to other parts of Mykolaiv, up 36%, particularly throat cancer. So there are clear health impacts of this on people, but of course on other species, including plants that are happening there. The story gets even more. This plant was purchased, and basically through kind of indirect schemes through Switzerland, but eventually the final beneficiary was Oleg Deripaska, one of the richest men and oligarchs in Russia, who owns a lot of aluminium industry. Of course, after the full-scale invasion, the refinery was nationalized, but the activists for years have been claiming that it was part of the military-industrial complex, particularly Ilya Zelinsky, who is now serving in the territorial defense in Ukraine. He claims that because that's where the city was trying to be, the Russians tried to besiege the city, and one of the strategic points that they were choosing this massive plant as their entrance to the city, because one of the directors also worked as an ex-MP in Russia and worked as an ex-military and worked for security in Russia. So there are lots of these links that are bringing suddenly this context together, and that paving the ground in a way before the full-scale invasion. And if you dig even deeper and you look at Oleg Deripaska, who used to be an owner of this industry, pollutes in the city for many, many years. There's an investigation by independent Russian group actually that revealed that this image that many of you unfortunately know is Mariupol drama theater, that the air bombs that were dropped on Mariupol theater included aluminium powder that was supplied by Oleg Deripaska's industry, where the raw material also would be coming from places like Mykolaiv. So basically starting with one point, we arrive at this very complex temporal and spatial entanglement of environmental violence that we witness here, which lasts way before the beginning of scale of invasion, kind of overlaps and explode, where this, years of previous extractivism contribute and continue to shape life on the ground indeed. And if you think about, living and doing this kind of work in Ukraine, is that once again, returning to the basic conditions of life, the water in Mykolaiv remains not potable. It is not potable because of the invasion, because of the strategic destruction of critical infrastructure, but also in some parts of Mykolaiv, the water even holds arsenic from the nearby industry, so the situation even worse. So how do we start fighting for environmental justice? What does it mean? What does it mean for these communities impacted by many factors? This is an open question. One thing I can say is that the environmentalist I went to look at this particular site. One thing they're at least hoping to do is to install an information board writing about this particular species of plants, because there's not even an information board, and this field can be crossed over and people dump trash and stuff like that. So I guess the steps are very small. And I'll stop here.